All right, good afternoon, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Sheila Hall. I'm Executive Director at the Clarington Board of Trade and Office of Economic Development, and I am your designated mouthpiece for the beginning of this session, so bear with me for one moment. I just want to thank everybody for attending. This is being brought to you in partnership with Durham Recruiting and the Durham Economic Task Force, which is a group of dedicated leaders across the region of Durham from all the boards of trades, chambers of commerce, economic development offices, BIAs, and the BACD, who are trying to pull our brain power together and make sure that we're providing resources and opportunities for all the businesses across the region of Durham to learn and collaborate and work together to get us through this time. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dustin Kello from Durham Recruiting, and they are going to educate us for another half an hour or so.
We'll do our best. Just bear with me one sec. How do I share this again?
Go back to here.
Okay.
Hit, click off, just click off share. And you're going to share your PowerPoint. Where's your, do you have your email open? You probably have your, click your PowerPoint. Now click over here. Now click share.
Oh, it's not coming up.
Just hit X. Now hit share.
There we go.
Double click share.
Okay. Can everybody see this all right? I'm assuming, Sheila? Just give thumbs up. Okay. I'm just going to do one more check on participants. And so always seems to be a few last ones that are going from meeting to meeting. I don't want people to miss out. Okay. So thank you again, Sheila, for the introduction, and thank you everybody for taking the time to join us. I know that there's been a lot of webinars out there. There's a lot of information. So we do appreciate the fact that you're taking the time to join us. Our goal is to provide you some value and walk away with hopefully some key tips on how to really about your brand image. And we'll talk about this a little bit throughout the presentation. I just wanted to give a shout out to the great work from our business community. I can't speak for other communities, but sorry. So yeah, I can't speak to other regions, but I've been pretty impressed and pretty happy with the great work that the Durham region has done. Durham Economic Development and the regional team itself. They're a great resource. So for those of you who are not aware of Invest Durham, they've done an excellent job of collecting and collating all of the information that we would need as business owners and even for employees. And there's the website below the link. And just to let you know, we will leave, if you want a copy of this deck, we'll leave that to you. We also have some other things as well that we'll supply for you. Okay, maybe that's better. Also, the chambers. So the business advisory, if for those entrepreneurs that are out there, I would strongly recommend reaching out to Teresa and her team. They were excellent to Diane and I when we first started Durham Recruiting, and of course all the chambers who have been an amazing resource for information as well. So if you're not part of your local chamber, you should be. And also the local business community leaders all coming together at the regional, local level, and also the BIA. So there seems to be a real commitment within the community of, kind of pulling together and using this as, I don't know, I guess as a rally cry, but just to help and share resources. So I wanted just to acknowledge that. Quickly about us, Durham Recruiting, we've been around now for 3 years. My wife and I started. It's been quite the ride, but our position really was, full service recruitment and human resources, keeping our top talent here. I've done the commute. I used to do two hours door to door, and really we wanted to, make sure there was an option for people to find jobs here and make that connection. Also, just leading up before I got to Durham Recruiting, I've been 20 years in market research and strategy and advertising and branding. And I say that because today, it's going to be lots of fun for me in particular, because we're not just going to be wearing our HR hats. We're going to be also using our marketing hats, our branding hats, and our strategy hats as we go through this presentation. And then, after this last year, we had a lot of clients ask us, well, can you help us with HR related issues? And we basically said no, and we gave that business elsewhere. But we started to build this. We asked a lot of questions to the local business community as to what do you actually want, and now we've started to develop it. We had our grand opening March 27th. Unfortunately, COVID. So Andrea and her team have done a great job of actively getting out there and trying to serve the community as best as possible. Just a disclaimer, because we have to. These are our opinions. We're trying to provide as much factual information as possible, but just like when you go into the government website, they have a disclaimer as well. You're ultimately responsible to determine the legality, and every situation is different. So, this is advice, friendly advice, but don't take it as legal. So let's go. This is Walter Payton, one of the greatest running backs of all time. And he said, when you're good at something, you'll tell everyone. But when you are great at something, people will tell you. And that's really the crutch of what we're going to be discussing today. Because at the end of the day, it's all about, hold on, I gotta cut. What we're going to be really focusing on is your brand, your personal brand, and your company brand. We're in a very hypersensitive society right now, and we're under the microscope. And it doesn't matter as business owners how much stress and angst that we're feeling. We still have to truck on through and try to put the best foot forward. Are we going to make mistakes? Absolutely. But remember, we are being watched. And at the end of the day, there will be winners and losers when this is behind us. So this is not about policies and procedures. This is about looking at the bigger picture and focusing on, your brand image and preserving that. Otherwise, there's potential for it to become tarnished. Here's an example of that. We were proud to work with Complex Profiles. Not too long ago, they switched over to focus on face shields. I mean, that's one example of many here in Durham where companies have stepped up. But, there's the losers on this, and, it's heartbreaking, and I don't want to go too far down this road with the long-term care, but those 5 in particular that have been in the news recently, what the military found was absolutely, disgusting, in my opinion. And they're going to be the losers. And what this headline, why I pulled it out, is it was clear that management didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have policies in place. They didn't take control of the situation. Look, we're not involved in the day-to-day, so it's easy for us to cast blame. But from the inside, it was very clear that management didn't control the situation, and that was to their detriment. So, adjusting to the new normal. 57% of Canadians say COVID-19 is now the most important top of mind concern. So going back to my market research days, I used to do a lot of opinion polling. And typically, and this would all be unaided, so just tell me what's on your mind. And the highest usually would be around 20%, and that's usually healthcare. So for it to be 57%, that is very significant. And they also acknowledge, this is the biggest thing that we've had to face since World War II. So people understand the enormity of it, but it's also causing a lot of angst. There's more and more talk about mental wellness. These are Ontario stats. 2/3 of Ontarians feel that mental health has impacted them in some way or will impact them some way. And this might actually continue, I don't know, but it's there, and we need to acknowledge it. And as business leaders, you know, we're feeling stressed too. Believe me, I'm a business owner. I felt every single emotion you could think of, and it's tough. But sometimes we just have to, put on our boots, roll up our sleeves, and get her done. And when we're bringing in staff, we don't know their situation. We don't know what they're feeling. So for me and for Andrea and for us to you is, this is something that you need to acknowledge, must be aware of it, and have a plan or be prepared. You know your staff, some staff you know better than others, but check in, okay, and adapt accordingly. There is a consensus out there, that there is a duty for all of us to ensure safety of others. So this is another poll done from a market research company, and it's clear on. People from Ontario say that you have to have either face masks or keep up with social distancing. So this suggests that we are adapting generally, and they would be open and probably expect changes in the workplace in terms of health and safety. But that being said, look at the news with Trinity Bellwood. So the moment we were allowed to let us all out and enjoy the sunshine, it was chaos. So there's a big difference between saying it and doing it. So this is important. This, as we feed into more of the detail into our presentation, it's not enough to set policies and have people sign it and then just think everything is okay. Again, we're in a very hypersensitive time right now. We are being watched. Things are changing all the time. Like it is so fluid right now, and you see. Trudeau coming out the other day with the 10 sick days, and who's responsible for that? Now we have to keep on track for that. Doug Ford talked about, extending the 13 weeks. So there's always something changing, and it is imperative that not only you set the policies, but you enforce them and make sure, what we call your culture warriors, the people that, have that emotional commitment to your company, are utilized and helping you to enforce and communicate to your staff. So again, the emphasis here is you have to walk the walk. You can't just say it because in groups, as you can see at Trinity Bellwood, we can be dummies. Just a caution point here as well, and something to consider. A lot of people want to get back to work. Some people can't. Some people don't want to get back to work. But across the board, there is some cautious people or worried about the workplace readiness. Doug Ford opened it up a couple weeks ago. We don't know what's going to happen with phase 2. It looks like it just got extended again. And so the worry is the consistency, and this is a challenge for all of us. We talked about in our last webinar, the government has provided some guardrails, but they're not enforceable. They're not mandated. They're recommended. So, for example, I can go into one grocery store and I have to wear a face mask, and I can go to the next one and I don't have to wear it. So, what is right? What is wrong? And there's so much inconsistency that people are worried. So again, it reinforces to us that there is a big expectation that all workplaces must take, the necessary precautions to ensure health and safety, and where possible, physical distancing. I know in some cases for our clients, that's very difficult within manufacturing in particular. So again, we have to understand, our workforce. But all that being said, we really do believe this is a great opportunity. I always like to try to put a positive spin into everything, no matter what the situation is. And, when we started thinking about this topic, and it just came naturally because we started having these conversations with our clients already who are reaching out to us and saying, we don't need to be a Debbie Downer. It sucks. Yes, we understand. But boy, look at what you could be doing and getting some real brand equity built up for you. So here's a quick reality check before we get into that. Actions taken, now, or not taken now, will impact your personal company's brand image, right? So think about that. Society is hyper aware, hypersensitive, hyper reactive. As we really move into the maturity of this phase, we are definitely going to hear more stories about companies not adhering, not doing the right things, and likely the government's going to have to react and actually enforce and put some real mandates on. We have a contact at the ministry, and right now their sense is, we're sending people out, but it's more or less to help provide some guidance to businesses. We're not really there to enforce unless they're blatant, but they expect that to evolve as companies don't put their best foot forward. But again, this is the whole first impression. It doesn't matter how mature your business is. This is an opportunity for a massive reset because we're all resetting our lives. So this is a good chance for you to make a first impression and how you handle this situation. And consider who's watching. It's not only your employees, but your employees talk, and there's that pluralized effect. Customers, suppliers, clients, colleagues and peers, government. And as you know, all it takes is one incident for everyone to pass judgment. So again, we have to take control of that messaging and take control of the approach. Look at it from a big picture perspective, but plan for this. This is a real, as I mentioned, this is a rare opportunity to really re-engage your team. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to hand it off to Andrea here soon. We really focus on employees because that's the most important, because they are the ones who, will leave work and say, hey, you know what, Dustin and Andrea are doing a great job at keeping me safe, or no, they're not doing it, and next thing you know, it blows up. So regardless of how strong or weak your culture is, it's still a great time to either enhance, improve, or this is an opportunity for you to pivot. Otherwise, you are at risk of two things. One, losing top talent, and we've talked to companies already who were kind of laggards in this, and people were hypersensitive. They lost a couple of key people, or tarnishing your brand in the end. So this is a stat that we pulled out. 30% of your workforce, this is general, are really connected to your team, your business. They're emotionally engaged. Back to that culture warriors. That 50% is kind of, sometimes I'm engaged, sometimes I'm not. I'm just coming into work and then I'm doing my work. And then there's that 20 that are just not happy. We see this as an opportunity to potentially move those 50% and move some of them, left. And you know what? With that 20%, some of those people may not come back. They may not, some of them will, but some may not come back and just stick on serve or look in a different direction. So again, there's some opportunity to really move it over. And just think about that for a second. If I had, gaining that emotional commitment to a company in the new normal, what would that be worth to me, worth to my business? So last point on this, why employee engagement should matter. This is obviously stats from pre-COVID, but I would say this would actually be amplified. And going back to my branding days, we've done a lot of business-to-business surveys and interaction. Engaged employees will bring an increased profitability and productivity. Remember, there's a pluralized effect. If you have somebody who really fits with your culture, loves what they do every single day, is really committed and engaged, well, that's going to have an effect. If that's the center point, those concentric rings, well, they will have that 1.5 or 2 times, productivity effect versus somebody who's disengaged. So imagine, what is the financial and cultural impact to your business if you could have increased those number of engaged employees, so from that 30% to say even 40%. It's very, very tough to do it generally. We are in a, I wouldn't say calamity, but we're in a situation now where this is a good time to make some changes and to show, not to get too political, but when you look at, they're always surveying all the, the leaders, so provincial leaders and the federal leader. Pre-COVID, Doug Ford wasn't looking very good, but the way he's been perceived in handling this, his brand has skyrocketed. I think the last one I looked at, he had the highest rating across the country, right? Trudeau has dipped a little bit, but again, when you take in that leadership and you kind of find your stride and you involve everybody, you know, that now is that new perception. So there's a real opportunity, if you need to kind of reinvent yourself or reinvent the culture. So I'm going to pass along here to Andrew here momentarily, but just for the construct of these 5 categories, we feel that there's 5 areas that you should consider executing to ensure that your culture is great, your brand image out of this will be you know, still, you know, good, but also when this is all said and done and your brand shines through, from a recruiting perspective, people will want to work with you. People are watching. They are soaking up media. Well, I can't say everybody, because my wife, for example, she stopped watching media because it's too negative. So there are those as well. But it's out there and people will be watching and talking, and word of mouth is so powerful, particularly now because of social media, and people are bored, they're at home, you know, or other people are at home and you come from work and you're talking about it. This is top of mind and the most important topics, notwithstanding the issues that are happening with the US right now. So again, it's about, you know, working together. We'll talk about this. So developing a return to work plan, getting buy-in from everybody, developing and executing those policies and procedures as a team, communicating with all stakeholders and being explicit with your workplace, and strengthen strategy. So I'm going to pass along to our expert. She's probably the best HR person in the world, unbiased. Here you go.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I don't know if you can see me and if I'm centered, but I know I'll get a text from Teresa if my face isn't properly in the screen. So I'm really happy to be here with you today. I appreciate the accolades from Dustin, so that's great. My goal, I think, of success for today would be, there are 5 key areas we're going to present to you as 5 key actions you could take. I think if you walked away with 1 to 3 activities that you thought were the most specific and relevant to your business, that would be a really successful thing. There's a lot going on. Don't try to boil the ocean. Just focus on the key pieces. We put these pillars in what we think are sequential order. You might be at a different stage of where you're progressing through all of these changes. So some of these might be more relevant than others. On the bottom, I would just call to light that when you think about engagement drivers, and there's tons of research out there, but the most important engagement factors that are relevant in our environment today are communicate, making sure you're communicating and setting clear expectations, making sure you're giving feedback and asking feedback for feedback, make sure you're recognizing the hard work of people that are stepping up and helping your business in these times, and making sure you're not just putting pen to paper, that you're actually holding people accountable to the new processes and tools and things you're putting into place in your workplace today. So we're going to go through each of these key pillars, and to me, just a little snippet about engagement. Highly engaged employees will help you build a high performance culture. They are the ones that are beside you. They are the ones asking for work. They are the ones that want you to stretch them and develop them and use them and give them new opportunities to learn and grow. And so this is a great opportunity to know who your highly engaged and high performers are and leverage them. So we'll go through these different topics and some creative ways you can do that. Okay, so this is really critical. So a lot of people, our last webinar was focused on developing your return to work plan. So if you have not seen our last webinar, there's a link to it on the next page. We will send out all these materials, but have a look at it. For today's purposes, we want to focus on the most critical piece around involving your employees in this. So this is really establishing your new norm, and really getting and involving your employees is critical to that success. So get their buy-in early. So if you already have establish your return to work plan, you want to make sure you are involving them now and getting their feedback and looking for opportunities to evolve and change them and get their recommendations. If you are still building or have yet to build your return to work plan, You really want to make sure you're getting them involved now up front, get their input, survey the group, ask for their feedback, and engage a lot early and often in the process. And as Dustin said, this is your opportunity to create a new first impression in our new world. And it's a really good, and Dustin added that last line there. Most importantly, show that you give a, you heard it from him. Normally I'd say it. Okay, so let's just go through this a little bit more. So we talked about a little bit. Your current context is on the left. So what's going on in the world of businesses in that we're talking to, and that how are people feeling? Hypersensitivity, high emotions, a lot of uncertainty, absenteeism, work refusals. I mean, you name it. You might be experiencing a lot of negativity or complaining on your workforce. That's a reality that might be in your world today. You might be struggling with scheduling and now and in the future. And at the end of the day, everybody wants to be heard. So the main actions, best practices for employers around this buy-in piece is really about collaborating with your employees, getting their feedback. And to get buy-in, I'd say in my opinion, there's 4 critical things. Sharing your journey of your thinking. Who have you talked to? And how are you, and what information, what do you know about the Ontario guidelines today? What do you need to know? So share where you've come, what your thoughts are, and then really truly ask for feedback and elicit a response. Don't ask the general questions like, how's everybody feeling, or what do you think? Be specific. How do you feel like, am I covering the things that are relevant to you? Am I missing anything in this idea or this plan? What else do I need to be thinking about? What do you think's really well about working really well with this plan? What's not working really well? So be specific around your questions and be vulnerable and authentic. If you don't know, you don't know, and let them know you're going to find out. And the most critical thing into getting employee buy-in is don't be attached to your outcome. There's nothing, it is very obvious in situations where people ask for your feedback and they really don't want it. So be mindful of that. Even if you have an idea of where you want to go or what processes you need to be putting in place, truly make sure that they have their voice is heard and that you are open to changing your opinions and ideas. So on this deck, you'll see the Business Recovery Planning webinar. So there's going to be a link to that. So you can go back to the Return to Work Business Planning Recovery. And we're also going to be including a survey sample in our appendix when we send out the material of questions to ask your employees to seek their input that might help you in those discussions. So just about policies and procedures. So now we've done, we've talked about the need to change. Now we need to put pen to paper. What processes, what tools do we need? And the benefit of it is actually true. 66% of Canadian businesses who have strong policies have generated year-over-year revenue growth in excess of 10%. So it's critical. It's definitely can add to the success of your business. And so if we jump to policies in general. So my opinion about policies and procedures, I'll give you the Cole's notes, but the truth. I don't think now's the time to be rolling out an 80-page manual to your employees. And I know that the world of policies can be daunting and it's not the most exciting, but I would tell you that there's a lot of stuff going on. So I know in your current context, what we're experiencing is the Ministry of Labor inspectors are out. They're visiting businesses. There's changing legislation. We've heard Trudeau say there's 10 paid sick days. Well, who's paying for that? How is that happening? What's the mechanics of that? The extension of the temporary layoff to more than 13 weeks for many businesses, that is a great, in my opinion, a great evolution for this time period, because if you laid off employees by March, in the middle of March, your 13 weeks is coming to a close soon. So you need to be aware of that and what that means. That basically means you can keep them on layoff without having to terminate their employment. So there's a lot of uncertainty, unknowns, compliance, not a lot of small businesses have made compliance a priority. And now, with the Ministry of Labor inspectors out there, I would suggest that you do amp it up. And then really all of the managing work refusals and absenteeism. So what processes do you need in place to make your life easier? So on the right, actions for you. I would focus on what's relevant today. I think the next critical window of time is September. I know that in June we'll hear from the schools about what will happen with schools come September. I think that's a critical milestone to consider for us. And then in 6 months, what will happen? Will there be a vaccine? What will happen? You know, will our businesses return to normal pre-pandemic? So I would tackle the items that are immediate to your here and now only. I wouldn't try to boil the ocean and have all of the policies. I would have what you need. I would have a COVID-19 policy, I would have, or a response plan, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of samples floating out there. We will include one for you. That is more, and I would say about the COVID policies, that's really going to outline all of your health and safety precautions, your commitment to health and safety, how are you managing physical distancing and sanitization in your offices. So your COVID policy is really specific to the experience now as it relates to the pandemic. And then there's all the other compliance policies and posters. You want to make sure you know what they are. We also handed out a compliance checklist last time. And so we'd be happy to reshare that as well, where you can kind of assess where you are. We do a lot of work for our clients in this area of compliance policies. It can take time. And so there's a lot of resources out. If you don't have somebody dedicated and you don't have the resources, you can outsource this work and get some help in the area of compliance. And then, you know, what else is relevant in the long term? Tackle them when it's time. So I'll give you an example. If you right now have your employees working from home, but if you anticipate today that your employees are probably going to work from home forever or for longer than 6 months, then I would move that up on your priority list. If you believe that there is an option for employees working from home to sort of end a little sooner, like maybe you're only looking at it as a 3-month window, I wouldn't write a policy on it right now. I would do the things that are imminent on your immediate need. Things like your vacation policy, your sick leave policy, your employment contracts. Like this is an opportunity to scrub your contracts, make sure you've got the, the right stuff in there. I would also make sure you're asking for volunteers or appointing key staff to train and reinforce on your policies and processes, share the workload, and then commit to your policies. So really make sure you're using them, you're talking to them, and you're holding your team accountable to them. And change them. Like once you put it in paper, you can change them as you go. Okay. In the absence of information, people come to their own conclusions. Dustin asked me whose quote this was, and I was going to say mine, but I know it's not. So I love this quote because it's so true. So don't let people interpret your story for you. If you don't interpret your messaging and your communication now, so we're moving on to the communication pillar, it will be told for you, and you really want to make sure you're proactive and you're getting your messages out. So then all of your stakeholders. So make sure you have a communication plan for all stakeholders. So you know what messages you need to send and when. And I have a chart on the next, which is kind of a nice visual to explain or give you some thought starters, but what is your universal messaging you want everybody to you'd be able to say to everybody? And then what is your specific stakeholder messages? So what's the targeted messages for them? And make sure you're communicating regular and often and leveraging multiple mediums. We know the digital world is here upon us, the good, the bad, and the ugly about it, but how do we leverage it to our advantage? And so we got to upskill ourselves how to use this new technology like we all are. And ensure your employees are aware to speak to all the stakeholder communications. So don't just focus your employee internal communications there. They need to be aware of the messaging you're sending to every other stakeholder so they can support that message. You want everybody to be aligned. And I would actually leverage a communication lead here. So a lot of big corporations have the luxury of having a designated corporate communication leader. And I suspect for many of us, we wear it as part of our hats, as one of our multiple hats. But perhaps you can get some help from a high performer, highly engaged employee, and get them to step up and help you with this because it's big and it's important, and it needs some time and attention. This is a sample of the communication, all of the different items to consider. So for your universal messages, when are you opening, what's the timing, how committed you are to health and safety, and really you want to make sure that you're communicating your confidence in your return to work plans, so that confidence is sent and that perception is created with your audience. On the left is your internal bucket. So your internal communications, it's huge, right? This is probably where you'll spend the most of your time. You've got employees, you've got your laid off employees, and you've got supervisors and managers. And there's some key messages you need to give to all of these groups, right? So your current employees, all of the changes listed there. Your laid off employees, how are you welcoming them back into your business because they've gone through a tough time? How do you make sure you're reestablishing their experience when they get re-onboarded in your business? So don't forget about that. And your supervisors and managers, you need to make sure that you have the best people as leaders in your organization that are supporting your messaging, your processes, the decisions you're making, and that they actually are speaking and aligned to the messaging. And they're not saying, well, it's not my policy. I think this is stupid. I'm not going to do it. You need to make sure that their messaging is aligned and supporting the overall message. And then on the right are all your external messages, customers, clients, suppliers, and vendors. And the key thing here is the impression you want to create. So you want people to be saying about yourself, they care about health and safety, they're adapting to our needs, they're adaptable, they continue to be adaptable, and they are ready. That's the impression you want to leave, and that's what you try to target your communications around, giving those type of messages. I love this quote by Warren Buffett. I'll let you read it while I have a sip of water. So this pandemic is exposing right now what's really hidden beneath the surface. So if you think about your workplace culture, how people are responding, who's showing up, who's asking if they can help you, and who's troubling, or who's like the troubled, that doesn't want to help, that's trying to avoid, you know, this is really pressure testing our businesses and our response to change. So it's really, really a cool time to really get a truth, a clear view of what your culture is today, what it truly is. So this is why I think this is a really, really important right now. And it's about being explicit about your culture. So you have the opportunity to get the truth. You're seeing all the behaviors of your employees. You're seeing misaligned behaviors to maybe what you think your corporate culture or values are. You're thinking about physical distancing. So if you had a culture that was really built on team cohesion and collaboration, and you had this culture where you spent a lot of time connecting through workplace events and meetings and lunches, and now we have this physical distancing barrier, how are you going to pivot your culture to still capture that team cohesion you want? And some employees could be worried about what to expect when they come back. So there's a lot of emotion. Be explicit, so enhance, make a pivot. Know what your company values are. What are your top 3 to 5? Know them. And then closely assess the response of your employees. Watch them, right? And like we've said before, your key talent, your high performing, your highly engaged employees, put them, use them. There is nothing that makes them feel happier than to feel used and involved and included in decision making. And the greatest opportunity, I will say, comes when we are uncomfortable for learning and development. So don't think to yourself, well, this is a territory they've never been in before. Put them in it because they might love it and grow and develop from it. To develop an exit strategy for disengaged low performers. I'm a big fan of this. Realize it costs money. I've got to hurry up. Realize this costs money, but I would know what those costs are to your business, and I would start planning it. If you can look at those 20% low disengaged, they're actually out to, impact your business in a negative way. Well, how about we muscle build your organization and we look at replacing them with more high-spirited, highly engaged, high performers, and what will that do to your life? And then feedback and recognition for those who have stepped up. And I realize people might think, recognition doesn't have to always have a cost associated to it. So it doesn't have to be financial recognition. There are many creative ways out to do that. And so now is the time to truly build your winning team and your winning culture. And you can tell I'm very passionate about that one, probably more than the policies and the procedure section. So lastly, this capability to embrace change. So this is critical. I think that we all agree this isn't going to end. I think there's, the worry of a second wave coming. There's more change coming. And I would even go so far as to bet this might not be the only pandemic we live in our lifetime or our kids' lifetime. So we need to get prepared for change, I think, as a regular way of life. And, really, I would say, stay educated on the legislation, obviously the announcements. I would look at this as a time to assess how you've responded so far to the change. So how have you as a leader responded? How did you react? How uncomfortable were you? And then I would build plans to strengthen gap areas. So really taking an active approach to embracing change, I think is really critical. Oh, I had an animation here. So really, the key message here around the different comfort levels. So when we think about the pandemic, it presented us with probably that last waterfall where the guy's solo on the bottom right. And I'm not sure too many of us would be comfortable tackling that level of the whitewater rafting. And so we all have different levels, and but we do need to learn to be able to adapt and embrace change. And so people who are really successful at embracing change are those that seek out different and novel ways to do things. They actively pursue different things. They're not stuck in this concept of, oh, well, this is just the way we've always done it. So how do you change the mindset and strengthen our capability to adapt and adjust to change for the future? Oh, and ask for, yes, for sure. Destin just said, ask for feedback. Feedback for sure is really, really critical when you're thinking about how you're dealing with change, and making sure that employees, how are you as a leader adapting, and ask for feedback about how they see you. So we are going to open it up to Q&A. We have exactly, what time are we? We are 1:42, and we would ask that if you can either do one or two things. You can come on the chat and ask questions. We have Teresa helping us with the chat, or you can actually just unmute yourself and ask the question live.
Yeah, we're happy to stay beyond the 2 o'clock if you guys would like to stay on and ask some questions. So here are some thought starters. So we'll open up to the floor. Should we put in the share screen?
What do you mean?
Andrea, can I ask, I'll maybe start off questions because somebody always has to be the first, right?
Yeah, the brave soul.
Or the mouthy one, I don't know. You in the last slide, or the second last slide, you mentioned something about providing recognition to those high performer, easily transitioned employees, and that not all recognition has to be in the form of financial. So I wonder if for the group you might want to share a couple of examples of what those non-financial recognition points might be.
I have 3 of my favorite examples. I'm glad you asked that, Sheila, because my favorite examples of my experience were I had a letter written home, a handwritten note sent home to my spouse to thank them for supporting me during a really busy time at work. And I thought that was just an amazing and thoughtful thing to do. That was one of my favorites. The other was a certificate with an extra day off. I realize absenteeism in general might be I know there's a cost associated with that and might be a struggle for scheduling, but in cases where you might have some workers that have been working through the pandemic, could you offer them some extra time off? Just say, hey, can you take Friday afternoon off? Great idea. And then the third one was I love smart food popcorn. And it was just left on my chair with a little message of thanks, a personalized little message of thanks. And so those things didn't take a lot of time, but they were personal and specific to me and really impacted me.
I would just add to that, during this period, we talked a lot about communication. Sometimes it's not a bad thing to over communicate. And I know that some companies will have meetings in the morning, and it's, just a little shout out is so important as well, just to be acknowledged or recognized. We hear this all the time. That's the number one thing is, I'm working my butt off and nobody cares, or nobody's acknowledging it or seeing it, and that can wear thin. So recognition shouldn't cost anything. It should just be more of you wanting to acknowledge the great work that they're doing. It goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. You have any good examples, Sheila, from your experience?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, no, I didn't hear that.
I said, do you have any good experience or good ideas from your experience, Sheila, that you could share? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you do.
Well, you're the experts, right?
Okay, no problem.
I think I'd just also add to this. We talked a lot about, the here and now and, making pivots and developing a plan and policy. But this has to go beyond. This has to be, that infrastructure, that, your Bible, if you will, that everybody has now, had some buy-in or had some input to it, or at least that's the hope that they would. And so now it becomes a document, something that has real tangible meaning. And if you execute it well, don't think of this as just, the pandemic policy. Think of this as the policy moving forward. And to Andrew's point earlier, be flexible and keep it evolving, because at the end of the day, that's really what your brand is about. This is the opportunity to start that if you haven't done so already.
Okay. Good. Andrea, I don't know if you had a chance to look at some of the questions.
No, but I'd love it. I can't see the chat box. Can you see?
Okay, let me read one to you. I've got a couple. So, any suggestions on handling employees who aren't back because of daycare, but we need their role filled?
That's a good one, because the people that have daycare or are caring for people as a result of the pandemic, they are job protected. So that means you would need to, protect their job for when they're ready to return. They're covered under the new infectious disease emergency leave. So you need to maybe think of creative ways around leveraging temporary staff or contract staff or role sharing jobs, shifting within your organization. But yeah, that's a big hot topic for people. And so I'm glad you asked.
So if it's protected, does that mean you still have to pay them too?
Nope, you don't have to pay them. If they are on the infectious emergency disease leave, they would be eligible for government benefits through CERB or through EI.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Another question. Are there any thoughts outside of sending emails with information, like somebody has tried town halls and FAQs?
I would do multiple. When it comes to internal, I would try to do large, and I know this is limited based on technology, but you don't want to be in a place where your employees say, well, I didn't know the policy, because that's what the first thing a low performer is going to say. So I would do multiple ways. I would do large groups. I would share by email. I would have smaller group team meetings, and I would do random one-on-one checks with people that you suspect would make that claim of I didn't know in the future. So I think there's multiple mediums, and I would try to leverage all of them, and I would keep documents of what you're sending by email, and that you have everything kind of compiled of how you've been communicating, especially at this particular time.
Okay, great.
Yeah, this is really critical for all business leaders if they can, because I know we've got a million things that we're juggling, and I know for a fact because I live it too. But try your best to set some time aside to be visible. It is so critical right now, and this is the feedback. These are conversations that we're having with companies. Be visible, be present, and engage with your staff, even if it's just a, hey, how you doing? Again, it goes back to that point where, we don't know everybody's situation. They might have a spouse that, isn't working. Maybe, things are really tight, or they know somebody who's sick or has COVID, or somebody who might have passed away and they can't go to the funeral. Like, there's so many things that are happening, those environmental forces that are at play here. So it's, again, if you want to set your culture, then you can't do it by an informal email. My personal view is, and from the work that I've done in the past, try to be face-to-face as much as possible. Get your cultural leaders, get the people who you trust and will advocate for you, and those good soldiers, get them involved and be clear on the message and control that message and have that engagement period. That will now set the foundation for the future.
Thank you. we're open to taking questions from anybody. How about you mention, Andrea, what you're going to send with, you're going to send out the PowerPoint, and I know you mentioned you might have some templates.
Yeah, so we're going to send out the deck. Give us a couple of days. We're going to send out the deck that has links to our previous webinar. There's also a link that's provided on the change slide to how to lead through transformational times. It's also a webinar that's on our YouTube channel that you can have a look at. It gives you some tools to how to coach people through change and acceptance of change, which is really relevant. We're going to send you a sample COVID policy or response plan, whatever you want to call it, that is really a good opportunity for you to start in the policy section. And to the last question around, oh, sorry, no, I won't even answer that. I'll just.
Well, and the survey as well. So going back to step one, asking for feedback. I found online a really great resource that I'll share with you that has a number of different questions that have been put in different areas that would cover different areas. So feel free to use that if you find value. So I'll send that as a PDF as well. And there's also an appendix to this presentation so that you have that as well for additional information.
We're all in for sharing. So to me, this isn't the time to be, it's the time to share. It's not a time to reinvent the wheel. And so whatever we can share, we'd be happy to do so, and reach out if you have questions as well. Anything else come in, Teresa?
No. Well, Colleen actually mentioned that her team lead has a weekly check-in call called Tell Me Tuesday over coffee, and she chats via Zoom with the group. And then they also do a half-hour of yoga on Friday, so that's pretty cool.
Those are great ideas. I know a lot of people are sometimes feeling Zoom overload, but in more intimate settings like that, I think it's great. And I think to see people, to see people through video conference is great.
Right. Okay, I see that.
Okay, so we just have a couple of closing thoughts here that we just wanted to share. Actions taken today will impact your brand tomorrow. Hang on. Involve your employees as much as possible to get their buy-in. Focus on relevant policies. Don't try to boil the ocean because it can be a big beast. Communicate to all stakeholders regularly and use the right mediums. Be open to seeing your culture in the raw, as it is during the pandemic. This is a great opportunity. Survey your team and assess how you responded to the pandemic. Get their feedback, because then if you want to build the capability on change, you want to know where your gaps are. Assign a change ambassador and a communication lead. So leverage the highly engaged, high performers that are around you. And now is the time to build your winning team for the future.
And I just add, as I mentioned in the first slide, about how our region and how our communities have all come together in sharing resource. I mean, we're more than happy to help anybody who has questions. But again, I go back to the Invest Durham. There's a lot of great resources there. The chambers, if they can't answer, I'm sure they have in their network somebody that could provide some guidance to you. Again, those entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, go see Teresa at BACD. She does phenomenal work. I mean, she helped Diane and I, and from that experience, I'm part of their team as well in helping a local community. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we're not alone here. You're not alone here. There is a network, and use that network. Making sure that you get the advice that you need so you can make those informed decisions.
And so here, sorry, yep, Teresa?
Sorry, I was just going to say there's a mention about, will there be a webinar in the future focused on how small businesses will change how customers see them and how their services have changed, and why should customers come back? So I will say that that's probably something that BACD will have a webinar on, but you're welcome to reach out to me, and I can certainly try and walk through that with you, because it might be specific to your business. I don't know who the person is. I couldn't, it's just a...
Okay. And whoops, lastly, from our perspective as well, from Durham HR Solutions, and Durham Recruiting. So we have an HR on-call service, you know, as our way of giving back to the community and to help support. You are more than welcome to leverage us, you know, and give me a call or an email, and to be a sounding board for any questions or issues you're dealing with. Please feel free to reach out to me. A lot of people are taking advantage of this, and I think it's great. If I can help in any way, I'd be happy to do so.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that as well, it's if you call and ask a question, we'll give you the answer. We'll give you half answer and then, oh, sign here and pay for the real answer. We don't do that. In terms of the recruitment side of things, I know it doesn't really fit here, but again, earlier, if you're looking to build your culture, well, you're going to have to add staff, and you know, addition by subtraction is one way, but also bringing in some new staff. You know, we're here to help, and I'm more than happy to provide some information on how to tell your story, how to target the people that you want, and where to target them. And again, and I have a little mini deck that I can share for reference as well. More than happy to help anybody who asks.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you've got our information here. Oops, I keep moving it around on you. Please reach out. All the best, and we look forward to kind of moving our businesses along so we can get back to the new normal.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Okay.